So, by now, there are tons of reviews out on the MacBook Air 15. If you've been watching my channel for a while, I don't tend to rush out reviews. I like to use the devices first before I tell you about them. That way, obviously, I can experience things that you as a potential owner may experience. In this case though, since there are so many reviews out on the Air 15, heck, even I made an early stage prediction video on it, which as you're about to see, funnily enough, ended up being pretty spot on, I thought I'd do this review a little differently. More focused on answering the question of whether the Air 15 is now a viable or even better choice than the MacBook Pro 14, specifically for professional use cases that I know well, content creation and software development. And this question is very timely for me right now. I'm massively growing this YouTube channel and hiring staff. They need computers to use, and we are a laptop-only shop here. My new staff needs laptops for video editing. Since we have limited space in the studio and people like to be mobile, the MacBook Pro 16 isn't ideal. I want to know, should I buy them a MacBook Air 15 or should I buy them a Pro 14? So, rather than make this decision off camera, I thought I'd get in deep, do some analysis and tell you what I found. But first, here is my super summarized view of the MacBook Air 15, which, by the way, I've been using solidly for the past 2 weeks. Overall, it is a fantastic choice for anyone who is using their laptop for lightweight use, consuming content, working on Office documents, and that sort of thing. In fact, I believe it is the best laptop you can buy for that purpose. The screen is very color accurate, bright, and crisp. And I definitely appreciated the larger screen size. Plus, Apple's macOS does an excellent job maximizing the information you can see on screen. Using the more space setting and slightly zooming in on Excel, I was able to comfortably see 50 rows, which is exceptional. Obviously substantially more than the smaller Air 13 with M2, and a row more than on the MacBook Pro 14. The reason that there is only 1 row difference between the Air 15's larger screen versus the Pro 14's is likely due to pixel density. The Pro 14 has a slightly higher pixel density and therefore increased clarity. Anyway, the laptop is extremely lightweight for a 15-inch and its thin size adds to just how portable it is. The M2 processor is incredibly snappy. In everyday use, it was just as fast as my MacBook Pro 14 with the M2 Pro chip. Things like opening applications were just as quick, and it certainly was fast enough to do some programming and video editing on, but more on that later. The laptop is also dead silent as there is no fan noise because there is no fan. One thing that is noticeably better on the Air 15 than the Air 13 is that it doesn't feel warm to the touch while you use it. This is because it's a larger laptop and the hotspots are further away from where your hands are. In these fanless laptops, normally the chassis itself acts as a heat spreader. So for a smaller device like the Air 13, you feel more warmth as your hands are closer to the hotspots. Plus, it still only draws 35 watts of power from the wall, which really isn't that much, and phenomenal when you consider the performance you get. Battery life is exceptionally long. I lowered the screen's brightness to 200 nits and played a Netflix video over Wi-Fi for 4 hours. At the end of the test, the Air had a whopping 72% battery remaining, which should get you around 14 hours for a similar use case. This is almost identical to the MacBook Pro 14 with M2, the 12-core variant that is. It had a little more remaining at 75% for the same test. This is a fantastic result for the Air 15, given it has a larger screen and a slightly smaller battery when compared to the Pro 14. The speakers are also fantastic, the webcam is good enough, and the fingerprint reader works well. There are 3 negatives, all of which are minor though, but I do want to mention them. The notch is still too large, especially as it does not support Face ID. In everyday use though, you really don't even notice it's there. The black coloured Midnight model, it looks amazing, but it shows smudges easily. I'd recommend thinking twice before picking that colour. And then the keyboard definitely feels low travel. It's not a bad keyboard as the keys feel snappy and precise to type on, but it's not as comfortable as the glorious keyboards on my Aero 14 or Dell XPS 13 Plus. The Air 15's keyboard feels identical to the Air 13's, which in my opinion is shallower and less comfortable than the MacBook Pro 14's. I'm guessing that this is because the Airs are thinner and Apple had to go with a keyboard with less travel to accommodate this. Oh, and one additional con is pricing. Although on the surface pricing does look good, upgrades are very expensive, especially the 16GB of RAM upgrade, which many people will want. At a price of almost $1,700 US, it's now very close to the price of a MacBook Pro 14 with M2, which is why I feel many people will be deciding between these 2 laptops. So, overall, Fantastic laptop for a user doing light tasks like content consumption and office work. But what about people trying to do professional tasks requiring a bit of performance, like my own staff? Let's take a look at performance starting with Geekbench 6, which tests a variety of common performance tasks. You can see that the MacBook Air 15 with its 8-core processor performs very well in single core, but unsurprisingly performs worse than the 12-core MacBook Pro 14 in multi-core. It is almost exactly slower in the same ratio as the number of cores it has less, i.e. it has 2/3 the cores, so it performs 2/3 as fast. But when we look at Cinebench, which tests the processor under full load, things get worse for the MacBook Air 15. In multi-core, its performance is now worse than the lack of cores it has. And if I run Cinebench on a loop for 10 minutes or even 30 minutes, things continue to get worse. This is because the Air 15 doesn't have a fan to cool the processor. So, the longer you run performance tasks, the slower the laptop becomes. You can see it already hits an insanely hot 105 degrees Celsius average core temperature for this test. The only way to keep the laptop's processor from getting even hotter is to feed it less power so it runs slower. And I want to be clear with you guys, a multi-core score of under 8,000 in Cinebench in 2023 is really not that good. That's a little worse than an Intel 13th Gen U series processor, which is their low-powered processor. Let's talk about some professional use cases. When editing a video on this laptop, I found it works surprisingly well. Our videos are reasonably complex with lots of footage, effects, and color grading. I noticed no major issues on the 16GB of RAM Air 15 that I have. It worked pretty well. After I pushed the laptop a little though, like switching between applications or ran an effect, that's when I noticed a couple of times that there were some dropped frames. That being said, my MacBook Pro 14 with the M2 Pro chip and 32GB of RAM also occasionally drops some frames. Not as many though. The biggest issue in editing videos on the Air though is when you go to export the video. Exporting is a very memory bandwidth dependent task. The Air has half the memory bandwidth of the M2 Pro chip, 100GB per second versus 200. The M2 Max chip, which is available as an upgrade for the MacBook Pro 14, has even more bandwidth at 400. This results in videos being twice as slow for me to render on the Air versus my M2 Pro equipped MacBook Pro 14. And this is an issue in a professional setting. Our videos are rendered multiple times as they go through various quality assurance checks. That extra time that the Air takes to render, it really adds up. You are talking around 4 times slower renders than on an M2 Max equipped MacBook Pro 14 or 16, then multiplied by how many times we render each video. But it isn't only performance that is an issue for creators. Most digital cameras use SD cards to transfer data. The MacBook Pro 14 has an SD card reader, the Air 15 does not. It's not efficient to constantly have to find a dongle to transfer files. Time is money in a professional setting. Oh, and while we're talking about ports, the Air still only supports one external monitor, whereas the Pros support multiple. Alright, let's talk about software development for a bit. Multi-core performance matters a lot, as does the amount of memory you have. Developers run IDEs, integrated development environments, which needs threads and memory to run. Then you'll need to run the application, or in some cases applications that you are developing and testing, which also, of course, needs memory and threads to run. Then you'll likely have multiple developer tools running. Sometimes to execute the tests effectively, you'll even need to run multiple virtual machines. All these require threads and memory to run, and often there is a lot of concurrency required. This is different to opening lots of browser tabs, where in modern browsers, the tabs you aren't currently looking at are just moved out of an operational mode until you re-click on them, so they free up threads and memory. As you've seen, the multi-core performance of the Air 15 is substantially less than the MacBook Pro 14. Plus, the Air 15 is limited to a max of 24GB of memory versus 96 for the Pro 14. So, if you are doing heavy software development on your laptop, i.e. you're developing and testing a large application with a large dataset, then I would not recommend you buy the Air 15. However, there are 3 types of software developers that I think the Air 15 will be great for, and perhaps even better than the MacBook Pro 14. 1. Computer science students. The Air 15 has more than enough power for you. 2. Software developers who write code that predominantly executes on a remote server, i.e. those building ML and AI models. And 3. Software developers who know the applications they are developing are very light in their performance needs, i.e. mostly front end. If you fit one of those use cases, as I said, the Air 15 may even be better than the Pro 14, as you'll enjoy a larger screen, which I believe helps you be more effective as a developer. Just make sure you get a minimum of 16 gig of memory and 512 gig of storage. On storage, my MacBook Pro 14 has a 2TB drive and the Air 15 that I have has a 512 gig drive. The Air 15 has slightly slower read speeds but significantly slower write speeds. As I understand, this is an issue with the smaller 256 and 512 gig drives on Apple's newer Macs. Honestly though, for most users the speeds of these smaller drives are fine. By the way, I haven't talked about the difference in the number of GPU cores on the Air versus those available on the Pro 14. Look, I just don't really do any heavy rendering tasks that use them, but I did play a couple of rounds of my favourite casual game League of Legends and it played very smoothly on the Air, even though it uses Rosetta 2 emulation. So, in conclusion, the MacBook Air 15 with M2 is a fantastic laptop. Definitely my pick as the best laptop that you can buy right now for light use, consuming content, using Office and that sort of thing. For professional level creative work like video editing, I do not recommend buying this laptop over the MacBook Pro 14. There is too big a performance drop, particularly due to memory bandwidth. Plus it lacks an SD card reader. For software developers like students or those doing less intensive development, the Air 15 is a good buy and I'd recommend it over the MacBook Pro 14. You get a larger screen, a slightly lighter laptop for a lower price. However, for those doing intensive software development on a laptop, i.e. large applications, large data sets, you should absolutely buy the MacBook Pro 14 or even the 16 over the Air 15. There is a substantial lack of multi-core performance on the Air 15 and memory is limited. Plus, even if you can develop on the Air 15 today, it won't give you the longevity of a more powerful MacBook Pro. Well, that's all for today, folks. What did you think of the Air 15? Would you buy it over the MacBook Pro 14? Let me know with a comment below. For my stuff, I think I'm going to go with the Pro 14. If you like this video, you know what to do. Smash that like button and get subscribed. Not only does it show your appreciation for the insane amount of work spent making these videos, and it is insane, but it also makes my mother very proud. Till next time, go do something awesome with your day, and I will catch you later.